Witnesses on the ground describe a state of utter hopelessness in Moscow, with one passenger lamenting, "No one comes. No one says a word, everyone's asleep, as people have been forced to sleep on airport floors for days." This is the reality in Moscow, where ATMs are reportedly non-functional, and panic has gripped the population amid uncertainty over the next attack. At Vnukovo Airport, all flights have been cancelled indefinitely. President Putin had reportedly sought to deliver a triumph to his people before Victory Day on May 9th, with his power and prestige hinging on such an outcome. He is said to have rejected Ukraine's ceasefire offer, committing all available resources to conclude the conflict, deploying thousands of drones and hundreds of ballistic missiles to target Kyiv. However, these attacks did not deter Ukraine. Instead, they are reported to have triggered an even more immediate and devastating response. President Zelensky spoke within hours, and his words were followed by action. Beginning on the night of May 7, 2026, Ukraine launched one of its largest air operations against Russia, deploying approximately 700 drones. More than 20 regions were targeted, including Moscow. 15 airports were paralyzed, stranding over 60,000 passengers in terminals and delaying more than 500 flights. Since May 3rd, Moscow's 3 major airports have all been simultaneously shut down. The chaos in Moscow is starkly summarized by a passenger's cry from the scene. "No one comes. No one says a word. Everyone's asleep." Some passengers reportedly waited over 16 hours for their flights, with no food or water provided. While reports claim blankets and beds were distributed, footage from the ground shows individuals sleeping on bare, concrete floors. There has been no food, no water, and no information from airport staff regarding when flights might resume. The disruption extends beyond the airports. Moscow's metro, which once transported 8 million people daily, has reportedly transformed into a ghost underground city. Russian officials, however, have largely downplayed this chaos. Moscow Mayor Sergei Sobyanin announced that 74 drones heading toward the capital were intercepted. Mayor Sobyanin presented this as a success story, yet the situation on the ground appears to contradict the narrative of a fully contained threat. This discrepancy between official statements and eyewitness accounts is highly unusual, particularly for a capital city under sustained assault. Historically, states tend to either fully suppress information or acknowledge significant disruption. But this simultaneous assertion of success amidst widespread chaos suggests a deliberate attempt to manage public perception that is failing in real time. Currently, Moscow is experiencing complete disarray. Internet services are down, airports remain paralyzed, and payment systems are malfunctioning. Locals are reporting that card payments are not universally accepted, and communications are intermittent. This is not an isolated incident spanning merely 1 or 2 days. Since May 3rd, for nearly a week, Moscow's airspace has been under almost continuous assault. Flights have been cancelled, delays have mounted, and passengers have grown increasingly desperate by the day. Muscovites are reportedly hearing the sound of Ukrainian drones in the streets, with air defense system explosions echoing across the city center. Each explosion, it is argued, creates another fissure in President Putin's promise of a safe Russia. The Moscow Times has encapsulated this situation, stating, "War has come home. Ukraine's drones are no longer exclusively targeting military installations. They are impacting the daily lives, the sense of security, and the trust in the regime among the Russian populace." While Moscow was paralyzed, Ukraine intensified its pressure, striking even deeper on the second night. On the night of May 8th, Sochi faced an unprecedented attack. Mayor Andrei Prushinin explained the situation, noting that the drone threat persisted for nearly a full day, continuing for 24 hours with only brief pauses. Sochi International Airport was completely shut down, leading to over 70 delayed flights and numerous cancellations. Passengers, mirroring the situation in Moscow, were stranded in terminals for extended periods. However, Sochi was merely the beginning. According to the Transport Ministry's own admission, the aviation and navigation building in Rostov-on-Don was hit by an unmanned aerial vehicle, completely paralyzing air traffic across southern Russia. Operations at a total of 13 airports, including Astrakhan, Volgograd, Grozny, Krasnodar, and Makhachkala, were suspended. In 2 nights, across 2 waves of attacks, Russia's air transportation network, stretching from Moscow to the Caucasus, reportedly collapsed entirely. Furthermore, it was not only the airport in Sochi that was affected. Fuel depots were also hit. Fires erupted at fuel storage facilities in the port area. The Archtinskaya railway station in the Volgograd region was also struck, impacting one of the main railway lines transporting military supplies to the southern front. Behind the airport chaos and burning depots lies another narrative, one that many may not fully perceive. For years, one of President Putin's most significant assurances to the Russian people has been that the war would remain over there, that their lives would continue normally, and that Moscow was safe. Footage from the ground reveals the current state of that promise. Moscow is in complete chaos. Internet is disrupted, airports are paralyzed, and payment systems are failing. Locals are complaining that card payments are not accepted everywhere, and communications are intermittent. The country possessing the world's largest nuclear arsenal is reportedly unable to maintain daily life in its own capital. Passengers are heard screaming in terminals, asking, "Where are we supposed to go?" Airports that once welcomed millions of tourists have been transformed into what resemble refugee camps. This situation is not confined to 1 or 2 days. Since May 3rd, for nearly a week, Moscow's airspace has been under almost continuous assault. Flights have been cancelled, delays have accumulated, and passengers have grown more desperate with each passing day. Muscovites are hearing the sound of Ukrainian drones in the streets, and air defense explosions echo across the city center, with every blast opening another crack in Putin's promise of a safe Russia. The full political consequences of this collapse are not yet visible, but the foundations are being laid. This is because President Putin's power is not solely built on fear. It is also built on comfort. The Russian people largely accepted the war because it was not directly affecting their daily lives. Now it is. And once a social contract is broken, its restoration is virtually impossible. The Moscow Times has summarized this picture. War has come home. Ukraine's drones are no longer hitting just military targets. They are impacting the daily life, the sense of security, and the trust in the regime among the Russian people. The May 7th and 8th attacks were not an isolated operation. A review of 1 week's balance sheet reveals a broader pattern. The burning of Sochi's fuel depots is not merely a news story about a fire. It is part of a military catastrophe. These depots were critical links in the fuel chain for 60,000 Russian soldiers in Crimea and units on the southern front. The Tuapse refinery had already been disabled by 4 attacks in late April. The fuel depot in Feodosia had been hit. Shadow Fleet tankers had been sunk. Now that the Sochi depots are also burning, the southern energy corridor has nearly completely collapsed, representing a significant cut in the logistics line heading to the front. Just 2 days earlier, on the night of May 5th, Ukraine's Flamingo missiles reportedly struck the Vineyard Progress facility in Cheboksary. This facility is understood to have produced the navigation brain for Shahed drones and Iskander missiles. That same week, the Kirishi refinery, one of Russia's 3 largest refineries, was also disabled. In 1 week, the weapons production chain has been disrupted, refinery capacity has dropped, the southern fuel corridor has collapsed, frontline logistics have been interrupted, and the capital's air transport network has been paralyzed. These are not isolated strikes. This is a coordinated, strategic campaign. Ukraine is targeting each component of Russia's war machine separately, aiming to slow the entire system. This level of coordinated, deep strike targeting against critical infrastructure, including weapons production and logistics, represents a significant evolution in Ukraine's strategic capabilities. It moves beyond tactical battlefield gains to systematically degrade Russia's long-term war-making capacity, a shift that could fundamentally alter the conflict's trajectory and challenge traditional military doctrine. Adding to this strategic damage is the irony of the timing, coinciding with Victory Day preparations for May 9th. Normally, this day is a glorious occasion when the Russian state showcases its power, its tanks, and its nuclear missiles to the world. However, Ukraine's operation has reportedly transformed this sacred day into a paranoia carnival. According to an Al Jazeera report, for the first time in President Putin's Russia, no missiles, Tanks or armored vehicles will be displayed at the parade. The Defense Ministry cited the current operational situation as the reason, but many observers believe the real reason is the Ukrainian drone threat. According to analysis from the Kyiv Independent, behind this decision also lies the Kremlin's fear of a coup. Reports from an international media consortium have revealed that President Putin is increasingly apprehensive of a coup attempt camouflaged as a drone strike. This paranoia is not limited to the parade. On May 9th, mobile internet service will be completely cut off in Moscow. Serious disruptions have continued throughout the week. The fear that drones could utilize cell phone signals for navigation has reportedly paralyzed Moscow's entire communications network. A Pantsir S-1 air defense system was placed on the roof of the Defense Ministry building, a measure typically seen in a war zone, now in the heart of the capital. Entrances to Red Square were closed, and intensified anti-drone measures were deployed around it. Russia's greatest symbolic showcase of military power in Europe, by decision of the Kremlin, would remain empty. Only marching soldiers and jet contrails would remain, with questions filling the space where tanks once stood. There is one more detail illustrating the scale of President Putin's apparent panic. According to a Ukrainian source, the Russian side offered, through unofficial channels, a prisoner exchange on the eve of May 9th if Ukraine would guarantee not to attack the Red Square parade. Consider this. The country with the world's largest nuclear arsenal is reportedly bargaining to protect its own parade. President Zelensky sent a message directly addressing this situation, stating that Russia has fought to the point where even its main parade is now dependent on Ukraine. This sends a clear signal. So, why can't Russia protect its own capital against 700 drones? The answer lies in simple mathematics. Russia's air defense systems, the S-300, S-400, and Pantsir, are limited in number. These systems must simultaneously cover three distinct areas: a front line exceeding 1,000 kilometers, Moscow and other major cities, and industrial facilities and energy infrastructure. This presents a classic blanket too short problem. If air defenses are concentrated in the capital to protect Moscow, Ukrainian drones and missiles operate freely on the front, leaving units unprotected. If they are kept on the front, Moscow's airports shut down, skyscrapers are hit, and 60,000 people are stranded in terminals. If industrial facilities are protected, both the capital and the front are left exposed. Ukraine understands this dilemma and systematically exploits it. The logic behind launching 700 drones on the same night is precisely this. Ukraine is employing a saturation strategy against Russia's air defenses, sending targets beyond the system's capacity to overwhelm the defense. Every drone shot down costs a missile. Every missile spent reduces capacity against the next wave. And Ukraine continues to send wave after wave. The result is evident. A Pantsir S-1 has been placed on the Defense Ministry's roof, forcing Russia's most prestigious military building to defend itself from its own rooftop. A drone hits a skyscraper in Moscow's most expensive neighborhood, and the world's largest nuclear power cannot keep 15 airports open simultaneously. President Putin could produce more systems, but production capacity is also in Ukraine's crosshairs. Cheboksary was hit, Kirishi was hit, Tuapse was hit. Russia can neither protect the existing blanket nor create a new one. This dilemma also explains why May 9th reportedly turned into such a paranoia carnival. The blanket too short problem highlights a critical strategic vulnerability for Russia, demonstrating that even a technologically advanced military cannot effectively defend against the multi-front, saturation-based drone campaign without severe compromises. This challenges the conventional wisdom that sheer military might guarantees homeland security, particularly against asymmetric threats. It is not just the West observing this situation. President Putin's allies, China, Iran, and North Korea, are watching carefully, and the view they are seeing is reportedly not encouraging. China is witnessing its ally fail to keep its capital airports open for even 20 hours. Russia's refineries, from Tuapse to Kirishi, are burning. The weapons production chain in Cheboksary is broken. Fuel depots in Sochi are in flames. Russia's weakening position makes Beijing the dominant partner in the alliance. However, being the dominant partner could also mean taking over the captaincy of a sinking ship. For Iran, the picture is even more concerning. The Cheboksary factory that produced the navigation brain for Shahed drones was hit this week by a Flamingo missile. If Russia cannot protect its own weapons production chain, how will it provide support to Iran? A question is quietly spreading among allies. If Russia cannot protect its own capital, how will it protect us? This question grows a little louder with every new drone attack. So, as the Kremlin loses credibility with its allies and skyscrapers are being hit, what are ordinary Russian citizens on the street and soldiers on the front lines experiencing? Beyond the politicians, generals, and veterans, what about the ordinary Russian citizen on the street? For them, daily life has reportedly transformed into a struggle for survival. Ukrainian drones are striking Russian refineries in an extremely systematic manner. Fuel production is dropping, and gas prices are skyrocketing. The energy infrastructure, already plagued by chronic issues, is literally falling apart. Power and water outages are no longer confined to rural areas, but are now occurring in the centers of major cities. However, the greatest collapse is unfolding in the digital disaster the state has created with its own hands. President Putin has escalated internet restrictions to such an irrational level to silence domestic opposition that the system is now reportedly consuming itself. Western social media platforms are already banned, but the real crisis erupted with the blocking of 80% of Telegram and plans to shut it down completely. While the state sought to silence its own people, it reportedly failed to realize it was blinding its own soldiers on the front lines. Russian soldiers rely heavily on Telegram for coordination on the battlefield, instead of using outdated military radios. Even the State Duma recognized this absurdity and was forced to issue a warning. Shutting down soldiers' most basic communication tool in the middle of a war is foolish. The Russian military is being left deaf and mute in the 21st century. Meanwhile, the public is being forced to use a domestic messaging app called Max. This is not merely an app. It is described as a tool for blackmail. If citizens wish to access educational services or medical appointments, they are required to use it. Those who refuse the app are reportedly deprived of their right to health care. In 2017, President Putin stated, "We will not follow China's path of internet censorship." Today, Russia has reportedly even surpassed China's censorship walls. And those paying the heaviest price for this blindness are the civilians living in border regions. In the Kursk region, border residents took to the streets demanding compensation that President Putin promised but allegedly failed to pay. Moscow, however, classified them as voluntary migrants and cut off all financial aid. Not a single official reportedly visited them. Left with no other option, the people recorded a video filled with defiance addressed to the regional governor. The regime's willingness to so casually abandon its own citizens, victims of the war it started, is presented as proof that the social contract between the state and the people has been completely torn apart. Digital censorship is proving insufficient to conceal the uprising in Kursk or the economic realities. What about the realities of the front lines? Russian military bloggers can no longer hide the carnage on the ground because the numbers and casualties are reportedly too massive to conceal. The latest reports from Z channels are chilling. They state clearly that the average lifespan of Russian attacks is 12 days. Analyses describe how Ukraine launches up to 500 FPV drones simultaneously and eliminates every Russian unit moving up to 20 kilometers deep. They liken the front line to a slaughterhouse in Siberia. The heaviest blow lies in this very sentence, coming from their own ranks. There is a growing sense that Russia cannot win the war because the current leadership cannot adapt to the realities of the conflict. Those expressing this view are war correspondents who are actually on the ground with the Russian army. Furthermore, they admit that the Ukrainian territories allegedly liberated at great cost have turned into irreversible hells, just like Russia itself. President Putin had aimed to end this war before May 9th. He rejected the ceasefire. He committed everything he had to Kyiv. What did he receive in return? A capital with collapsed airports. Tens of thousands of people lying on terminal floors. Burning fuel depots. A Victory Day parade with no tanks for the first time in 20 years. and a Kremlin reportedly offering prisoner exchanges to protect its parade. He wanted to end the war. Instead, the war has come to Moscow's streets. No safe place remains. The wind is now blowing in reverse.